answer. Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today's November 3, 2024. I want to thank Rob Grant in his outstanding podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. And thank Larry Gottheim, who basically connected me with today's guest, Haeyong Moon. Is that the correct way to say it?
You're doing it perfectly.
Haeyong Moon. Hey, Young, where are you calling in from?
Los Angeles, California. Highland
cool
Park, to be specific.
How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Sunlight.
Oh my God, I've never had that, and I love that answer. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
I like text a lot. So letters, poetry, newspapers, things that people write, using words.
Right, but that's called printed word. It's sort of called books, printed word. Did you become a reader because one, your parents told you to, two, they did it as an example, or three, on your own?
All three.
All three, yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Oh, information. I thought you were going to say, why do we collect things? I think we are curious beings and we want to learn from each other. We are not robots. So when we see or observe or, feel things, we want to respond and learn from it. Interaction.
You're really touching on a lot of the direction where we're going. So that's
okay.
Perfect. Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
Innate.
Yeah.
It's, I think, the human nature in us that we want to look, and our brain kind of, it gets triggered by the stimulus that we are faced with, observe, and then that becomes, we interpret it within our own experiences, our memories, and I think that's how we're just wired. I mean, I feel that way for myself.
Yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
It can.
Yeah.
Emotions can also create thoughts.
Yeah.
So it's both ways.
Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
pause.
Wow, that's a good word.
Is it? Because that's what I did just now.
Well, no, if you read my kind of hints before you do these podcasts with me, it says silence is okay. Most people can't handle silence on a cell phone or on a Zoom. They're like, oh, I think it glitched out. They're frozen, And pause is a great word because McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. So yours is sort of like, I don't know what I think until I reflect on it. That's what the pause means. Yeah.
I love silence. I mean, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I like it when people are just paused and, I can capture them in thought, because it's more important sometimes to see that than to actually have them say things.
Hear anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
We just watched a film called Sterile Cuckoo by Alan Pakula. And there are moments where they just hold longer than any film would nowadays. And it is so touching how we know. And to go to your subject of jazz, which you articulated so well in that Jeremy interview, that it's a community. You go, yeah, I'm into jazz. And people go, you're into jazz? It's like, it's a real unifying, connecting, medium, let's call it. But Thelonious Monk said, silence is the loudest sound in the universe. That is a great, for someone like, and then the other Monk line you'll love is, the greatest artist in Venice, a street artist, said, Thelonious heard all the notes Charlie Parker heard, but only decided to play some of them.
That's great.
That's like, oh, God, yeah, I already heard all those notes. I only played it. Okay.
Can I just say something?
Please, go ahead.
Okay. I just love that you watched the preview for my film, but also the interview that I did with Jeremy Siskin. Like, you're actually referencing it. This is amazing that you're.
Oh, it's great.
I mean, you're saying the things that I've said, like the jazz being the unifier and the community. I mean, I love that you really saw it. Thank you.
Yeah. No, and it's true, because see, what I want to do is try to get us into realms you have that aren't available on YouTube, because your other interview on KCR on New York is a lot. You kind of reiterate some of the stuff you say on Jeremy. So you've covered the Bud, the Bud Lives film somewhat, but we can go into it, but as you will. Now, the next question is, can humans think without language?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
It's not a verbal thing. I think you can think through music. You can think through images, colors. Yeah. These are all, I mean, I think so.
Yeah. What Chomsky says, a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
The first word I had in my head was pause. Once again, I guess I like that word a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, reflection, when language doesn't work, you have to stop and reflect and find a different way to communicate. People cry, tears, emotions, outbursts. These are not language per se, but a way of expressing yourself.
Very good. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Oh, I think it's balance.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody, but I think we're capable of doing both in a balanced way.
Yeah. Now, that's good, because we invented the word feeling and thinking. So we think we can separate them. They're really, so connected. Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. And I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? And so people who meditate, they go, okay, now think about not thinking. And then there's a bumper sticker on a car in my street that says, don't believe everything you think. And I said, well, you could say, don't believe everything you feel.
Yeah.
So these two, go ahead.
No, I'm generally, I think my philosophy in anything is to be balanced in these polar opposites of whatever these, it's often two sides of a coin, and I always try to find like the middle ground, common ground for things.
Yeah, that's what we call it, the resonating interval. It's the space in between, the in-betweenness. McLuhan says the gap is where the action is, but it is, 80% of people go, oh, we're more feeling beings. But here's how they say it. I think we're more feeling beings. So that reveals a lot right there.
A paradox, yep.
Yeah, these two are from Alan Turing in the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
Not necessarily, not entirely.
Yeah.
I think our brain, there's a lot of chemicals, and connections that are happening before we start thinking.
Yeah.
So, and that could be based on experience or previous exposure to whatever the stimulus is. So I think there's both. It's not entirely, because to me, the word soul seems a little bit, spiritual realm, it's rather than something scientific. And so I think there is definitely science in our ways of thinking.
Yeah. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Oh, no. Because, let's I guess it depends on what you mean by think.
Yeah.
You know, if you're thinking like a scientific math problem, yeah, it can think and give an answer. But when you're thinking about, you know, the chemical interaction, the obvious interactions based on experiences, but in addition to that, feelings and memories and all the other spiritual elements that a soul can provide, no, I don't think machines can do that.
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
That's a really good question. To me, those are equal.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say one or the other. So both equally.
Where I got the question, though, is Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says happiness doesn't tend to last, meaning tends to last.
I accept that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. Yeah, I was a psychology major, so consciousness was something that I was very interested in my 20s. And the reason I kind of pulled away from psychology is because you can't really concretely say consciousness is this. And
Yeah.
I had a hard time accepting that. And so that's probably why I kind of pulled away from it. And, you know, I like because I'm an artist, I like being in that middle ground of, you know, it can, but it also might not be, you know. I
Yeah.
like the idea of always being a little bit in between.
It's good. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Light has to be faster.
Audre Lorde, the poet, said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Her colleague Yvonne Rainer said, "No, you can if you expose the tools." What new tool do you suggest?
I don't know. That's a really interesting question. What
Well,
are people?
let me explain a little more, because basically I'm asking you, what tool do you most gravitate towards? You can add the word new if you want. And like I do, open some of these questions with cute quotes. It doesn't mean you have to apply it. But I mean, you kind of even go into these realms in your films, you know, dismantling the master's house. And then it's funny how Yvonne Rainer says, "Oh, well, you just expose the tools." But I mean, it's more so, what tool do you most gravitate towards?
Right. No, I understand what you're asking. I'm just trying to understand, why would somebody, I guess the purpose of dismantling the master's house is to what? It's to understand, or to get to the bottom of the root of the, I mean, I guess that's the logic I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, it's like James Baldwin and Audre Lorde. They were probably, their tool was, how do you dismantle white supremacy?
Oh, I see.
And and
The
so that's the
system.
master's house. So that's, a lot of people go, "Well, I don't want to dismantle the master's house." I mean, Frank Zappa said, in order to change things, you got to work within the system. So, I mean,
Okay, now
and
I see what the context is. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, I think it goes back to your first question. I think words.
yeah,
I don't know if there's new tools
yeah,
necessarily in that sense. I think
yeah,
human voice and human expression of using words is probably the most
yeah.
significant way to dismantle anything.
It is. It's very good. What new toy do you suggest?
No, I don't do any toys. I don't like new gadgets. I'm actually they have this term, early adopter. I'm like the last adopter. I'm very slow to technology, even though I work in technology and I'm in the generation of technology users. I am very slow to adopt it. simple things.
Yeah.
I like writing letters, writing postcards. I like talking to people in person. I don't like texting per se. You know, there are a lot of technology that I actually don't really follow.
What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I worry about, well, it's timely because we're, you know, facing this election, you know, in a couple of days. So that worries me. I worry about that. I also worry about my creativity sometimes. I do worry, will I have enough in me to finish my next project or my current project? That kind of keeps me up at night. Do I have enough of me? Do I have enough energy to, you know, do X, Y, Z? These are the things I worry about.
Yeah. McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions.
Mm-hmm.
So I ask you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
There's multiple ways to answer that. I think the most obvious one is I think people are so distracted. There's a lot of distraction in this world.
Yeah.
And partly the distraction is, there's a reason behind it, right? I think there's a, you know, not to be so stereotypical, but there is this mass media of this, you know, there's this thing that's being broadcast to everybody, you know, buy this, do this to buy your happiness, lose weight. You know, there's all these stuff that we hear about.
Yeah.
And so, and it's addictive to be feeding in to all these distractions in the world, and then you lose time to pause. Again, there's that word.
Yeah.
You forget that you can pause and reflect and choose, filter what you want to input to your system, whereas just being completely wrapped into whatever the channels that are coming into you constantly. And overfeeding of information / everything else that happens in today's society, I think that is why people cannot really, you know, feel what artists feel, and that having that antenna. I think we all have antennas. I think we just don't know how to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. Two things Pascal said. The way to solve all the problems in the world is to learn how to sit in a room and be quiet. And do nothing. It's like, and the perfect example is me. When YouTube came out, I told all my friends, I can't believe this. And then I wouldn't do YouTube for 10 to 15 years. The first year I made a YouTube and I knew about it, but I would not go there. Now I am addicted to the distraction. I watch YouTube all day and I think, oh, I found out about this new film, great. And then, but I am addicted to the distraction. That's it. Yeah, it's horrible.
But I bet you are choosing what you watch, though.
I'm choosing because my distraction level is 2 to 3 seconds. I'm out of there in 2 to 3 seconds.
Really?
And you know, the industry standard is 10 seconds.
Wow.
I goes, and I've asked students before, and they says, oh, maybe 30 seconds. And you know, I'm like, I'll admit I can, anyways.
Wow.
Do artists have moral obligation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I am a firm believer of that. And sometimes I struggle with that because, you know, people like to look at a work of art or something that somebody created and kind of detach, you know, whatever's happening in their personal life. I can't. I seem to connect the work of art and the artist. I have a hard time disconnecting those two. And I think it's because I think work of art is most impactful when it is a reflection of the person. You know, I think we're all trying to express something through our antennas, like you said. And so it's hard to completely detach the work of art from the artist. And so if some artist did something morally, horrible, I have a hard time kind of watching through the creation and being.
It's super challenging because Lena
Yeah.
Riefenstahl's a great filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yikes. And my friend
Right.
cannot, by choice, teach Woody Allen in his film class because he wants to, but he knows he'll get in trouble. And so it's like, okay, well, but that's a big subject. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Afraid is an interesting word.
Yeah.
But if you're asking what do I prefer or less prefer, I guess I prefer new ideas. So I'm.
Yeah. But it's interesting because first of all, you get it. It's me and you versus the wording on the question. So I like when people go, oh, I don't know if that word works. When you challenge the wording, or shift it or say, oh, no, I would prefer a different word. And I like you went to fear because a lot of people go, I'm not afraid of ideas. So, they miss, is it new or old? And then you said that early adapter thing. You said you're not an early adapter. Is that what you said? Early. But then you said you're not afraid of new ideas. So that's, that's sort of in embracing a contradiction.
Right. Well, we're contradictory beings. I never said I'm always consistent.
That's the best
right?
thing. Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we all have different sides to us, and I think afraid is that's why I paused on that word, because sometimes being afraid is a good thing.
Exactly. Yes.
And so,
and it's easy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, yes, I'm afraid of new ideas, but I also like having that stimulus in me, and so that's kind of why I answered it that way.
No, that's good. It reminded me of George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic. They said, what kind of music do you like? And he goes, the kind of music that pisses me off. So I can figure out, why would this music piss me off? How can music piss you off? I hate this. And we all have our, you gravitated towards, Bird and in jazz when your peer group is, I don't know how much, but it doesn't seem that your peer group were jazz bows. They were more like whatever, another genre. But why does anyone gravitate? We'll get into that. The next question is,
I just love that you have all these references from all over the place. Anytime you say a new name, I'm just laughing because of it. Anyway, go ahead.
Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
I think I was 4 or 5 years old. I was living in Bangkok, Thailand at the time. And my mom dropped me off at a daycare. And I think that was probably the first time I was dropped off somewhere with a bunch of strangers. And I remember she said that I was going to stay there for a few hours. And I remember crying and just having a tantrum. And, my mom, I remember watching my mom as she went to the door, and I saw the door closing, and I just lost it. And I think I cried for a long time. And I think I felt this, I probably passed out. I think I just went to sleep just from crying. But that emotion and the fear of just losing, the person that you couldn't lose, you absolutely cannot lose, is very strong to me. And I think that's one of my first early memories.
It's amazing you said that, because it actually happened to me too. And
really,
remember that I cried. I don't know if I passed out, but I remember that. And it's, haven't thought of it in years.
Wow.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Oh, curse is such a bad word. I wouldn't say curse. I wouldn't say curse, even though I know that some memories, especially traumatic memories, things that you don't want to remember, can be like a curse. But life is full of memories, and I think that it's more of a blessing.
Yeah. No, it's funny because 98% say blessing, but there are people who go curse. And just giving those, it's called false dichotomy. Most of these early questions, is it more this or more that?
Right.
You'll love this. This woman once said, the word more doesn't function in your question. Is it more this or more that?
Right.
Well, it's both, and it depends context.
I bet you've had interviews where you couldn't even go on to the next question because they were just picking on words. Does that happen to you? Where
Oh, well, no, it's fun when they analyze words because it helps me refine, but it's also, it's such a, I'm actually doing a project right now on who started on the street interviews, and it could have been Steve Allen with a microphone, if you ever figure it out. But then I started thinking, well, who started the interview? Who was the first in human culture that started, I'm going to interview you? So the thing about interviewing, having studied it for 40 years and done it, is it's a power trip because I'm sort of in charge, and people go, no, you just want to have a conversation. Like one friend said, I don't want to do this because I'd rather just have a conversation. But I mean, that's what my goal is to have a conversation, but it is sort of, I'm following a script. You'll love this. This woman I tried to interview for 10 years, and usually if they don't say yes, Carolyn Casey, she's an amazing, she has a show on Pacifica, and it's sort of new agey astrology, but it's really semiotics, and it's political activism and environmental activism, but she's sort of like a female Alan Watts. She's very funny. And I start asking her, and I says, well, I've studied your lines for 20 years on the radio. I use them all the time. You're brilliant. But and I shouldn't have said this, I kind of want you to jump out of your stock lines. She said, then drop your script. And I didn't, And my friend said, dude, you should listen to that interview 6 times. You might learn something. But it went all right. I mean, it went for 2 hours, but it is just this thing about, saying the word curse or blessing. Like you said, like, no, it's not a curse. Memory's not a curse, but when people say, yes, it's a curse, then you wonder, well, why did they answer that? And 98% of people say blessing. So it's just setting up this. So tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
Is that it has to be a family member, you said?
Well, it's immediate family because the follow-up is outside your immediate.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Got it. All right, I'll play along. I think my mother and the impact.
What do you think the main thing you got from your mom?
Her sensitivity, her creativity, and her willpower.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's her career?
She worked before she got married, but she was a stay-at-home mom because our family moved around so much internationally because of my dad's job. And so she was she took care of the kids, but she was she's still alive. I mean, I'm saying she was, but I could always see her as somebody who could have been so much more if she didn't get married and with my dad, and if she didn't have us. I always imagined that she would have been, a totally different person. Yeah. And having seen her in her 30s and 40s, I just remember, just having that feeling of, wow, she could have been so much more. And so
Yeah.
there was a sadness when I saw her. And so I think that's the willpower I'm talking about, is because I still see it in her. And that is inspiring, and that keeps me going.
It's beautiful. Really well put. I can imagine it. You're really good with words. And I got to tell you, before you said, you go, I'll play along. That's what these are about, is having fun and being playful. And so now the same question outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you, and what was that specifically?
Well, there's a lot. It's hard to pick just a few names, but I have a lot of father figures in my filmmaking life. And I'm thinking of Larry Gottheim is one of them. Billy Woodbury is another one. He was a teacher of mine.
Let's go with Larry.
Yeah.
What's it like? Summarize what you got from Larry Gottheim, kind of.
He gave me the encouragement. I think he was the first one who told me, your vision is on.
Yeah.
I was a film student at Binghamton, where he was a teacher in the late 90s. I was a student there, and I took one of the filmmaking classes, and I shot a roll of 16 millimeter black and white. And, that class, I remember we were just projecting the reel, not edited. It's just camera roll that we just were projecting. And after the lights were on, and he said, your vision is on. And, I was so nervous. And that was the first time I was actually showing anything that I had shot. And he said that, and it just kind of meant the world to me. And from that moment on, he's been so encouraging me. He was one of the reasons why I moved out to California. When I graduated from Binghamton, I worked in New York for a couple of years, and he said that, why don't you think about grad school? And CalArts was one of the schools that he told me about. I had never been to CalArts. I applied, and I got in, and that's how I moved out here in 2001.
How cool. That's really good.
Yeah.
So did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No. Well, no, because they never forced me to continue it. But I mean, we did go to church, when I was young. It was more of a social thing. And then when I went to school, I followed my friends to some of their churches or temples. But I never really became into religion. The reason I liked going to church was because it was so quiet. I liked that it was meditative, and I thought, that quietness attracted me. And the time to reflect and to have people, to see people in their thoughts is I like seeing that and being part of it. It makes me want to do that.
It's good.
Yeah.
Do you pray?
I don't think so. Because pray, I think, is more religious, right?
Yeah.
That's what you mean? I have a lot of thoughts in my head, but I don't know if I would call it praying.
Yeah. Again, it's how people define the words, but that was good. If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Oh my God. Well, I'm going to replace that word God with something else, and then answer that question. We missed you.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is all the people or things that I've lost over the years. And I think we kind of encompasses that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a word I heard Charles Brown, the great jazz blues singer. They said, welcome to the homegoing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a homegoing. Welcome home. We missed you. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Unfortunately, I think evil people do exist, and I don't know if they were born innately evil or not. I don't want to believe that that's the case, but I do think that evil people do exist, unfortunately.
Because really the hidden question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob in The Samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I definitely understand what he's saying there, but I don't necessarily agree with it. You acknowledge people because that's just the way we are wired. I think we are born to acknowledge people. We acknowledge things before we even can stop ourselves to acknowledge it sometimes. And so, if we're affected by whatever evil people that we encounter, I don't know if we can stop us from not acknowledging them. So
let me just interject, because it's funny. Two things. One is people go, if you don't acknowledge them, you empower them. But again, it is sort of like you don't want to feed into their negativeness. But when you said we're wired to acknowledge others, that's amazing, because I'll walk down my street and my neighbors who I've seen for 40 years won't even like nod or give you eye contact. And I would yell out sometimes in frustration, which then they think you're nut.
But see, I think that's different. I'm sure they do acknowledge you because it's been 40 years.
Well, whatever. I mean, it's just like, it's not so much, I mean, not 40 years, but it's just, even if it's someone you've never met before, if you're walking down the street and you look at someone in the eyes, they don't want to give you eye contact normally. I mean, in Venice, it's a little different. On the boardwalk, it's all kinds of friends, and we usually do that. But, I just find, I wish people were more acknowledging of other humans. But it is, I would say we probably are wired. But there's something like, I go, don't worry about it, Jerry. Their parent might have died today, so they're in deep thought. So get over it. But, it's just like, it's more of something about me than them. But I go, if you do, acknowledging another person won't kill you, but why take a chance?
Well, I do want to add one thing, like acknowledging somebody, whether it's, negative or positive energy, it doesn't mean that you're taking their energy into you. I mean, you can decide what you want to do with that energy. And so I think not necessarily empowering them, but I think you can learn from it. That's what, I think that's the better way to move forward.
I agree. The best way is to learn from it.
Yeah.
But some people, like, I'm oversensitive about it. It's like, just get over it. They're just walking down the street. They don't need to say hello. But I mean, if a friend of yours said, oh, I'm being bullied, or, is having some conflict with a so-called enemy, what would you advise them? What would you say?
I think it really depends on what they're capable of doing. And if this person is capable of, responding to the bully in whatever way they want, I would encourage them to do that. But if they're not capable of doing that, then I would ask them to find a way to protect themselves.
Yeah, it's good. And Nassim Taleb said, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. My friend says, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson, the anthropologist, says, if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts. The basic question is, does punishment work?
These are strong words. Punishment, again, is a word that I mean, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
To an extent, I think it works. And I
Yeah.
think human beings, I think we need kind of a reward or some kind of not punishment. Again, punishment is too aggressive of a word for me, but there needs to be some kind of an end goal for
Yeah.
us to strive for it or to become better or to achieve something, a mission. I think we are goal-oriented animals. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's the best way to say it. So
Yeah.
I think to an extent, punishment works.
Yeah.
Not all the time, obviously. That shouldn't be the goal all the time, but to an extent, I think it works.
James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago.
Is that right?
Yeah, he had Volta Cinema. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Talk
Oh
about
my God.
talk about Larry Gottheim. That's Larry's most famous film. But years later, Faulkner said sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
No, that's an excellent question. We can talk about this for 1 hour. I mean, you already said all these keywords that I'm like, I used to be a projectionist. I was a film projectionist at Binghamton, also at Anthology Film Archives,
Wow.
and at CalArts. So I've
Wow.
projected, I was a real projectionist in and outside of school, 35 millimeter, 16 millimeter, you name it. But going back to even what James Joyce said, and that's interesting. Why? Okay, well, anything that is a representation of real life is not real life. And so a work of art, whether even if it is called documentary or experimental films or Larry's films of, the fog line or, trees, it's a representation of life. It's not the actual thing.
Yeah.
And so there is always a purpose for watching something that is a representation of something, because you're trying to understand what the artist was trying to capture.
Yeah.
Somebody told me actually recently that a work of art is creating something finite from something infinite.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of related to what we're talking about. We are trying to grasp or create something physical from something that is not physical, an experience of reality. Reality is not a physical thing because we experience reality in different ways. Like you have a different reality than I do, even in this moment.
Yep.
Our thoughts are going in different ways. Like you might be thinking of the next question or the one question before, I might be. So I think consciousness and reality and what artists are trying to create, it's always something different from the actual material of what happened today or the tree that was shot. It's always there's a layer of something that you're seeing or the artist is expressing. And so there's always meaning behind an artwork.
Yeah. How about this one? A CalArts grad said this: art is making your problems other people's problems.
Oh, no, I don't agree with that.
That's good.
And and that's actually that connects to your previous question of acknowledging evil.
Yeah.
I think maybe there is some truth in what this person said, but as a viewer, you can decide if you want to make it your problem or not.
Great, because it could be art is making your joy other people's joy.
Right.
You want to guess who said the problems quote?
No, who did it? Who did? If you want to say
Mike Kelly.
Oh.
And so, here's poet Fannie Howe. The point of art is to show people that life is worth living by showing that it isn't.
Oh, that's too negative to me.
Yeah, it's too negative. It's amazing.
It's negative.
I ask people both of these because I'm always trying to figure it out what that means. But I like that you said that. So we're going to go into that now. Tell me your through line just briefly,
Mm.
your tipping point, because at some point you already revealed you started studying psychology. So you're in high school. You're are you already leaning towards filmmaking as my calling? So really your calling is being a filmmaker. I would say that's your main calling. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So where's the tipping point where you go, that's what I want to do?
The
That's what
first,
in life. Yeah.
yeah, I think the first minor tipping point, first phase of the tipping point was in high school when I started taking film photos with my camera. I would go and just take photos in New York.
Yeah.
And I just loved composing, in the frame and just seeing how my composition came out in a print. The second tipping point was probably taking a film class and hearing Larry Gottheim tell me my vision is on.
Yeah.
But the actual, like the tip of the tipping point, the final phase of the tipping point was when I finished my last feature film about the historic theaters in downtown. I worked on that film for 9 years, and
Yeah.
during that 9 years, I really struggled. I didn't know if I could finish it because I had gathered 90 plus interviews with various people. I had hundreds of hours of footage, and because I was an independent filmmaker, I was going to edit this myself, and it was very hard because I had a full-time job, and I lost I had what they call a completion anxiety, where I couldn't even look at the
Yeah.
footage sometimes, and I was so negative. I was in a negative headspace. All the footage, rather than seeing the the great stories that people shared, I was picking on the technical errors and all the negative things that were just bogging me down. And so I couldn't move forward. And in 2019, when I finally was able to finish that film and I screened it, I think that's when I realized this is my calling. I finally feel that it's my calling. And, I can see myself working on another one. And I am working on another one. I'm now editing my second feature documentary about Bud Powell, the jazz pianist. So yes, there you go.
Amazing. Yeah. So really Broadway Treasures
Yeah.
took 9 years, and
Yeah.
that's a feature doc.
Mm-hmm.
And people can watch that on YouTube free, or pay it for streaming, or how can they see it?
They can see it. I have not posted it on YouTube because the film was finished right before the pandemic. My goal of the film was to screen it in old theaters, in historic
Yeah.
theaters, because I wanted audiences to come into an old theater and look at the ambience and then feel the love people have for it. Because the pandemic closed a lot of the theaters down, I had 2 screenings before the pandemic at an old theater. So long story short, I have not yet posted it on YouTube because still I want to do some more screenings in historic theaters.
Yeah.
But they can get in touch with me, and I've been actually sharing screeners with people. Even a few weeks ago, somebody reached out wanting to see the film, so I sent them the link, and I'm always happy to share it indirectly.
Right. That's beautiful.
Mm.
So, a screenwriting teacher told me great art or great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're making one of your own films, when you're making Broadway Treasures, when you're making
Bud
Bud Lips?
Lips.
What role does intention play?
It plays an important role. It is the start of a project, because you have to have a strong intent to start something. It's not easy to start a film. It's not just a little idea. I mean, maybe some people do, but a documentary feature, you really have to have enough, fuel in your system for that intent, for it to take you to multiple steps, interviewing not just one, but like I said, I've interviewed 40 people. And these are people all over the country. And so I don't think it's a casual intent. You can't start a project with that. So I think to start a project, especially my project, I need a lot of intent. The strong intention is very important. But as the film process moves forward, the intent kind of transforms into other types of emotions, of learning about yourself, learning about the piece, and kind of letting the project be what it needs to be, and also kind of figuring out what is necessary and how the film, what role the film will have, or what role the film will play in the society. So I think you can't just have an intention of what you want. You actually have to listen to what the project needs to be for people. So does that make sense?
Well, you brought up a lot there, because that's it anticipates the next question. Let's just go into it, because it made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your viewer when you're making your film?
Yeah. I love Duchamp. When I was making experimental films, because that's how I started making films. I was an experimental filmmaker.
Yeah.
I was very much a believer of personal expression, and this is what I want to say. This is what I don't want to talk about it. It's like my work should speak for itself. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
My theater project, my first feature documentary, I think that's when I started to be more in tune with the audience. And it actually was a big learning experience for me. Agnes Varda, one of my heroes, has said that the last phase of art is sharing, art making. You need to share it for it to be a complete process. And so I do believe that, and that's why I was alluding to before, you start with an intention of something that you want to talk about, but you also have to share it, and it has to land somewhere. It has to reach somebody's head. It can't just be this thing on the sidewalk. It has to be meaningful for another person outside of yourself. And that is the actual intent, of an artwork. It can't just be something that is flying around and in space. It has to be something that I make and you understand, or you take something of to your head, or you know what I mean? It has to make an impact. It has to land.
It's amazing. You covered so much there, because one is let the art speak for itself. Brackett used to go, let the art piece speak for itself, and then he would talk for 2 hours about his film. It's just critical thinking, and that's what you're able to do. I mean, you don't have to be articulate about your art form, but nowadays you have to be. You can't just make your art and then not say anything, because that is not saying. In fact, Battle of Algiers is probably the greatest political doc ever made, and it's a fake documentary. It's not
narrative.
Film in a lot of ways. And they asked Gilo, what does your film do to people? And he goes, it teaches them how to make a film. Now the Bush cronies used it as a training film, how to suppress uprising, and the Black Panthers used it as a training film on how to do an uprising. So it did something in the middle perfect. It's hard to do that with docs, especially. I want to go into docs, but since you brought up experimental films, this one first is McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. So knife and fork extends our teeth. The shutter in a camera or a projector extends our eyelid. Even maybe non-tangible like religion or philosophy could extend consciousness. What does the moving image camera extend for you? Whether it's a Bolex 16 millimeter or a video camera, what does a moving image camera extend? What humanness?
Lots of different types of humanness. I mean, everything that you said about Okay, well, the vision, there's definitely the visual
Yeah.
need for us to see something pleasant. So there's that. There's an intent from the mind of wanting to make something meaningful, whether it's an informational, or some kind of something.
Yeah.
There's a purpose for whatever you're trying to film. But also it could just be memory, consciousness. It could be the
Yeah.
driver of it. So there's multiple
Yeah, no, that's good.
parts.
It's funny because McLuhan says, what do movies extend? He says, the foot, because you're traveling. Because it's like a magic carpet ride, to go, spend just in your trailer
Yeah,
for your Bud Powell. I mean,
yeah.
that trailer is so well done because it's in the midst of seeing Bud play.
Mm.
And you see him, his eyes are like looking to
Mm.
heaven.
Right.
It's amazing.
Right.
And then you're caught in what does this guy's music do? And then you have talking heads say this or that. But in the essence, that 4 minutes is framed in what Bud did. And so, McLuhan said there's no such thing as a good or a bad film. It's a good or a bad viewing experience. Any comment?
Well, being that I was a projectionist, I take offense to that because, a lot of times when the screening is technically perfect, I don't think projectionists ever get really thanked for it. It's only when something happens where they get really, scolded for it.
Isn't that amazing? Because there's one thing I got to say is
Yeah.
one of the greatest films ever shown in Ann Arbor. 64 years of experimental films. The medium's only 130 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Black and Decker Hedge Trimmers Murders by, I forgot his name. Anyways, it's a funny Barbie doll film. And at the end, it says, directed by Stanley Kubrick, produced by Lillian Hellman. Any complaints, talk to the projectionist.
How funny.
That's all people want to do in Ann Arbor is like, that film sucked. How did that get in here? I mean, it in the experimental film world. It's hard to find people who even have an aesthetic for it.
Right.
It goes to Peter Greenaway said, cinema's much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. So that's a funny statement, but it is a visual, it's a moving image art form. And all we've done, I don't want to over ration down Peter Greenaway's statement, but all we've done basically for 130 years is film plays. That's all it is. It's not, being an experimental film world that it's gone beyond that, but that's all. In essence, when someone goes, I saw a movie, they told some story. So the question is, are experimental filmmakers telling stories a different way or doing something completely different? Because if me or you watch Tony Conrad's A Flicker, it's 15 minutes of black and white flickering on and off. We could have a story go through our head, but it's not really a story per se. So any comment on that line, cinema's much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers?
I agree wholeheartedly.
Really?
Yeah, because I actually don't watch a lot of narrative films or TV shows, and sometimes when I do watch them, I have a hard time following the story because I'm caught up in the visuals. And so I think it depends on who you're speaking to, but people who are used to experimental films and who understands the film media as this rich medium that has so many things happening with the sound and the way the light is moving or a part of the frame is lit up in a different way that's kind of focuses your attention that way. It's not necessarily the focal. I don't know, maybe I'm not the prime audience for narrative, but I think it's true. I think the film medium is very rich, has a lot of potential in becoming or being so many things.
Yeah.
It's hard to just put it in one box.
It's funny because Andrew Noren said, if you put one frame after another, that is narrative. That is
Yeah.
storytelling.
Yeah.
And Hollis Frampton said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die.
Aw.
So my question is, can you forget to die?
Can you forget to die? I suppose you can. We forget a lot of things.
Yeah. No, it's funny because people aren't sure if they're not taking the question literally or metaphorically. So you handled it well.
Oh, yeah?
Well, yeah, because you said, yeah, you can forget to die, but most people say, no, you can't forget to die because we're so obsessed with it. That's all, we think. I mean, so it's good. You have an open mind,
Yeah.
but then I just discovered this question last week is, if all words are metaphorical, then what's the difference between metaphor and literal? If you take something literal, literal is still a metaphor. So
That's
talk
true.
about a conundrum.
That's true. That's true.
If me and you were starting the Ann Arbor Film Festival 6 decades ago, would you want it to be more inclusive or more exclusive? And I'll set it up because Chick Strand was starting Canyon Cinema at the same time. And she said, when I asked her this, she says, well, we were trying to recreate our 11-cent movie going experience. So we would show, a newsreel, a cartoon, and then experimental film. And then Brackage came along and says, no, don't show that other stuff, just show experimental films. So if you were starting a film festival, would you want it to be more inclusive or more exclusive?
More inclusive.
Yeah. Because why?
Because isn't that the point of art making? I mean, being exclusive is against art making, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of contradicting what art making is. Art making is supposed to be inclusive of everyone's vision, and it's all unique. If there is just one type of something, which kind of says, I mean, exclusivity is that one thing that we're supposed to be all in a common understanding. I mean, then what is the point of making art?
Yeah. Well, then what are the services and disservices of marginalizing experimental film? Jackson Pollock was on the cover of Life magazine in 1949. There was no Bruce Conner or Maya Deren on Life magazine covers. Normal people in America could start developing an aesthetic about experimental painting. So I find it's generally privileged or rich art kids who develop an avant-garde aesthetic and dominate experimental film. Any comment?
Wow. You're saying that.
Good facial expression.
What did I do? I didn't even look at myself.
No, but I mean, I can ask you that because you went to Cal Arts. I mean, was Cal Arts privileged, entitled kids, and they get to develop experimental film, and it. I mean, showing at an anthology, this experimental film world well. I mean, you've covered it, and you've gone towards the documentary. I mean, same with documentary. Is it more, and like you're saying, inclusive? But it seems experimental film, especially, is an exclusive kind of genre,
Yeah, I can't believe you said that. I think that's pretty a bold statement, considering a lot of the people who are watching this is probably from, familiar with that Cal Arts or, that community. Well, it is a privileged thing, art making. It's not one of the essential forms of life, like, traditional work, right? When we think of traditional work, manufacturing or medicine or whatever that form is, it has a more direct impact on the society. And art is definitely not one of those, but it's still meaningful. And I think I still believe that. It's hard for me to kind of respond to that, because even though I am from, I went to film school, went to anthology and projected there. So I was surrounded by people who were making art for a living. But I also saw a lot of people who had a full-time job. They were plumbers during the day or worked in catering, and they were doing art making because that was what they wanted to do. But so those are the people that I want to highlight, as opposed to the privileged, art students that go into experimental films and, who are wealthier.
I always say rich kids are trustafarians. It's not their fault. If you're born rich, it's not your fault. It's how you deal. You can become a supporter of the arts or whatever. But it is funny, you even shifted it from experimental film to art. I mean, art is an exclusive world, and then now it's even more so. It's just like amazing. But there are people I spoke with Michael Apted 40 years ago, and I said, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, but it flourished in the 80s with MTV. To the point Marty Scorsese says, I cut my films faster because of MTV. So Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. So my question is asked with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
The latter. We're brainwashed. I mean, I don't think we can take in any information faster than our human minds can take it. I mean, I think we're kidding ourselves if we believe that.
Well, can humans literally multitask?
To an extent, but we're not good at it. I'm not good at it. I'll speak for myself. I definitely multitask, but I'm not good at it. And I try not to. I try to focus on one thing at a time, because I know my limitations. And my brain function isn't too bad, but even for myself, like I don't like to multitask, because I am more prolific when I'm focusing on one thing. Like right now, I'm talking to you and I'm trying to focus my head to just talk to you, as opposed to other things that I can think about. So yes, I think we can multitask, but I don't think that's a productive way to use our brains.
Yeah, when I asked this question once to a woman who's writes children's books and whatnot, I could tell she was checking her email during.
Oh yeah.
And she goes, I'm checking my email right now. I'm multitasking.
Wow.
And
That's bold.
I mean, at least she was honest in the thing.
True.
Having been trained on Zoom so much over the last 4 or 5 years, we can literally look like you're sort of thinking, but actually going off and checking something on Wikipedia and adding to the discussion. But all my events for 40 years were people in a room live talking, after a film or just having discussions.
Yeah.
And now I learned, and people don't like to hear this, people are more attentive and more present on Zoom than they are in a room. Because it's only your face, and you're just more focused visually on your hands and your face. And they're like, they just seem to be more present. And if me and you were in a room, our eyes would be wandering.
Yeah.
So it's sort of amazing phenomenon that what we're doing right now is called television telephone. And guess what year it started? In 1939, the same year Finnegan's Wake came out by James Joyce, at the New York World's Fair showed television telephone in 1939. But it became kind of a reality for all of us in 68 when Kubrick showed it in 2001, where the guy calls his daughter from the spaceship to wish her a happy birthday. And we were basically learning Zoom then.
Fascinating.
So let's go into the framing aesthetic, because you said you started. Now, were you raised going to art museums and art galleries? Did you start forming an art, like, then you said then you started shooting photographs on the streets of New York? Had you already developed some sort of aesthetic on what art is, you know?
I think I must have. My dad was an avid photographer. He took a lot of photos when I was young,
Yeah.
and we traveled quite a bit as a family, and so art museum was always something that we would be going to. If we went to Paris, definitely went to the Louvre. You know, any major cities that we went to, we always went to a museum. I don't think I enjoyed it as much because my dad was a planner, and so we just have like maybe an hour here, an hour there, and so it wasn't I wasn't. Maybe that's why I keep going back to the word pause. Like I wish I had a little bit more pause in my childhood, because it just feels like I was here 3 years, here 3 years. I kept on
Right.
moving. So now, as I'm a mature person, I spend a lot of time thinking about my
Yeah.
childhood and the moments that I wish I could go back to and just have a little bit more time to reflect on that or take it in. But
That's
yeah, I
the
think,
beauty, you know, of, like, I always say, you become your parent. You know, Oscar Wilde said, well, when I saw my female friends turning 50, they fretted becoming their mother, and my male friends didn't. And Oscar Wilde nailed it. He says, uh, women fret becoming their mothers, men don't, and that's their problem. So you might have, like, you become your parents. You don't have a choice. The DNA and the environment, not completely, but you also become contrary. So your dad being a timer, then now you have learned through him being the timer to learn to appreciate pause. So it could have been that. Maybe you wouldn't have if he would have just said, "Hey, just go sit in the park. You don't have to come in the art museum."
right.
You know, so
No,
it's
no, you are getting my point exactly. I think that's kind of what I was trying to say, is that, yeah, my dad being that way is how I have learned to become who I am now. Same thing about what I said about my mom earlier. It's there are a lot of aspects of her that I find myself similarities with her, but
yeah,
also things that I'm completely different from. And it's
yeah.
because we have this love and hate, you know, a constant
But also
flow.
they probably taught you discerning and critical thinking. And you go, "Oh, I want to kind of go more towards this. This is what I liked. I learned from my mom." I mean, what were the three words you said you learned from your mom were amazing? Sensitivity, creativity, and willpower.
Mm,
That's amazing, because I
mm,
often ask people, "Where'd you get your work ethic from?" And
mm,
98% go, "From my parents."
mhm,
If you look on Wikipedia, about the third paragraph down on work ethic, it
mm.
said, "This could be a scam from capitalism consumer culture."
Wow.
I mean, the big question is, would you rather be a documentary filmmaker full time than, I mean, is your day job post
Yeah,
production manager?
I'm a director of post production. Yes,
Yeah. I mean, would
management.
you rather not do that and just do documentary films, or do you like having a day job that's, you know,
That's
like
a
what?
great question for me, because I've actually, you know, if you had asked me that 10 years ago, I would have said, oh, of course I would want to be a full time filmmaker.
Right.
But now I actually prefer having a job and
Because of
doing,
the stability of it.
not just because of the stability of it. I've learned that I function better when I feel more connected to the society in a real way, in a concrete way, where I'm actually,
Right.
when I'm working and I'm actually making an impact on whatever the commerce, whatever is happening in that industry, I feel
Yeah.
like I am doing my part in the workings of society as a worker. And I think
That's
the
really
work ethic, yeah, the work ethic, I think that comes from my dad, because he had a job for a long time at one company, and so I always saw him going to work in the morning and coming back. And that kind of ingrained memory in my head is probably something that's important to me. And so if I don't work, I feel a little guilty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Notice I sort of misconstrued that. You said the third thing with your mom was willpower. That's not work ethic. I just flipped it into it. Then you said, no, I'll correct that. I got my work ethic from my dad. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah.
So I have balanced.
Yeah. Because your mom did have a work ethic because she was raising, how many kids did she have?
3, including me.
She was raising 3 kids. Guess what? That's a full-time job.
Oh,
They
yeah.
call it technician.
Yeah, no,
they don't credit with mothers to being oh, she's just a housewife. It's like,
no, I would never say that. And especially now as I'm getting older and I appreciate and I have a better understanding of my mother and her life. Now that I'm at an age where, by the time she was my age, she had, 3 kids and they were all in school and all this stuff. Like, I appreciate her so much for it.
Yeah. Well, let's go here. This is George Manupelli, founder of Ann Arbor Film Festival. His mantra was ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas said, there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor said, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me.
Wow.
Is art making more?
Let's pause. Let's go back to those 3 things again. Can you say it one more time, but slower?
Thank you so much for being an astute listener.
Oh, yeah.
Most people, I just rattle these things off, and
but these are really great quotes. That's why I want you to slow it down.
I overbear people with too much information, and then I ask them a question, and then they think about the question.
Right.
But seldom do people really. George Manupelli said his mantra was ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas, I saw him at the Pacific Blue Theater building in LA, say there is no self-expression, which is funny. And Cecil Taylor, one of my heroes, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Now, the question is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant? Now, of course, in your sense, it's both, of course.
Yeah, you already knew my answer.
I know it's both, but it's sort of like it's just a prompt to talk about, is it a little more self-expression? It doesn't even, I'm not talking about making a value, like a quantitative, it's 80% more, but is it more self-expression or more you're a vehicle? It's just talking about those 2 ends of the spectrum. It's not, you don't have to make it's more this or that, even though I'll tell you how people answer it after you answer, how a lot of people say it, because it doesn't mean they're right either. There is no right or wrong answer.
I think it depends on the creation, the purpose of it. But I tend to believe that it's more of a self-expression.
Really? Because that's what
anything that is created, or anything that is any work of art is a creation, and it is essentially going through your mind and thought process, and there's this intent of you in it. It's not created by some other being, and so it is a form of self-expression. You're not completely detached from the work itself. If you're saying that it's a vehicle and you have to ignore yourself, that kind of makes it feel like you're separate from the work that you're creating, but you can't. You're part of it. You are making it. Your hands are on it. Your fingerprints will be on it.
James Brown, drummer, said, "Where you're the architect of funk drumming. Where'd you get this from?" He says, "I lived in Ohio, and one side of my house was a factory and the other side was a train track. So it's like, boom, boom. That's where he got it." And then they asked Ginger Baker, the drummer of Cream, "Where'd you get your drum sound from?" He goes, "I was in London when they were bombing." Boom, 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 But my favorite was the guy from Negative Land. He said, Missy Elliott said she learned how to sing from car alarms, which is
Okay.
because she's in that environment. Go ahead. What
No, I think this is great. You're
yeah.
really that was a great question there, because I often think about that. And even going back to my film project, actually, with Bud Powell, one of the questions that I asked one of my interviewees was, Bud Powell, Thelonious Monk, they're from Harlem, in New York City, and the sounds that they heard in that environment in the 60s and the 50s is in the music that they're playing. It's the loudness of it, and this, the explosive sounds that they were making is representing the environment they're coming from, the urban settings that they're coming from, and the 60s, if you can imagine, what was happening in New York City in the 60s. And so I think, yeah, I love that. I love that you're connecting the way people, artists, musicians perform in their instrument with the sounds that they grew up in, because I believe in that as well.
That's Thelonious Monk. Is this song of his goes, it's like a car horn honking at you.
Yeah, and you look at any of the footage of him playing, he is banging those keys. I mean, I often think like his hands must hurt so much from just banging it,
Oh, and then he pushes his rings up, and then he plays. And then, but my friend studied. I know a lot of people work. I mean, not a lot. I know people work with Cecil Taylor. He would bleed. His hands would bleed.
Yeah.
Don Pullen too. Their fingers would bleed playing the piano.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you, Mike Garson is another pianist that I interviewed.
So glad you got him.
Oh, good. He's great. I'm probably going to forward this over to Mike because he knows that I'm doing this interview. He actually, before he performs, he puts Band-Aids around all 5 fingers. And once I asked him, like, why do you do that? And he's like, actually, it gives him a little bit more protection. That little bit of Band-Aid on the tip of his fingers, that actually helps him perform, during the show. And so, the contact, because, the touch on the keys with your fingers, it's not just a consistent force. It's like variations of it. Some fingers you're hitting really hard, depending on the note that your sound you're trying to make. But he told me that story.
Well, Mike is high on my list. I'd love to. So
all right, I will. He would love to do this.
My friend who Mike's playing at the Baked Potato in a couple weeks.
Oh, okay.
And my friend's playing guitar with him, Nadab Paled, who's an amazing guitarist.
Okay.
But I saw Mike play once, and I was like, "Who is this?" I didn't have no idea who it was, and it took me a half a year to figure out that's who it was.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah.
He's also. Can I just say one thing? I think he would love talking to you because he's a thinker.
Yeah.
He's very. I think he would have interesting answers to any of these questions.
Yeah. Yeah, he's amazing. So I appreciate that.
Hi, Mike.
So, the follow-up.
Yes.
This is so fun. The follow-up to the more self-expression or more vehicle question is, can art making be egoless?
No. It's sad, but I think self-expression is part of speaking your ego. I mean, it's just an extent of how much you want to contain that ego, how much of it. If you take it too far, obviously, then it's, not good. It's a negative thing. But if you have a balanced level of ego, you're confident enough to make something and put it out there. And, because that requires some ego. It's not easy to make something from nothing and be confident enough to show it to strangers and accept something positive. And that requires ego. And so a healthy amount of ego is a requirement for being a good artist or a successful artist.
It's really amazing because the word ego carries a lot of baggage because of Freud, and people sometimes think I'm saying egotistical because it took a while. Most people answer it the way you did, but it took a while. And about a year ago, a woman said, great art is egoless. And then another woman said, great art has to be egoless. So it is this amazing thing where you're touching on some sort of universality that people can relate to, or some humanity they can relate to, instead of saying, oh, this is an expression of my particular ego. So that drives me to the couple of these questions. Is Milan Kundera said in Unbearable Likeness of Being, this is why I love writing, because the character that I'm writing about can go further than I can. And it's like, yeah, that sounds good. But if I write a character on a piece of paper, or you film, so how can that go further? You know,
I think he's talking about imagination. I totally understand what he's saying.
I mean, that still sounds romantic or poetic. You're hoping that it will, but how can the character itself, that's the user is making the character go further. And it's also follows up with Steve Martin loves to quote David Mamet. It's art is a product of the unconscious mind. You know, when Bud is playing a solo, I interviewed a lot of musicians. They say, don't think. I'm like, yeah, right. How do you not think? You have this Rolodex of licks in your head. And how do you go, okay, I'm not going to think about them. They're just going to come through me, you know, and they say, oh, that's the flow or whatever. But again, I mean, how can a character go further than, how can your film go further than your film than it does?
I understand what you're saying, but it's also impossible to prove otherwise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because how can you prove that it doesn't go farther?
How can you prove that it doesn't? Because here's Bertolt Brecht. This is Bertolt Brecht. He asked Charles Laughton. You know, have you ever seen Night of the Hunter? Yeah, I mean, one of the greatest films we've ever had. Charles Laughton said, well, Brecht said, why are you an actor? What is it? What is acting? He says, why do you act? And Charles Laughton said, because people don't know what they are like, and I think I can show them. Now that sounds egotistical, but again, it's sort of like,
it sounds judgmental too, more than anything.
Say it again.
It sounds judgmental. I think there's a negative.
Judgmental, but I think he's saying I'm opening up the floodgates and going, well, this is how I define my self identity, but maybe I'm more than that. And it opens them up. It's like Igor Stravinsky says, most people don't know what they like what they know. So if all you give them is Ken Burns and Michael Moore and Herzog, then you go, well, who do you like? You know, and then they like, I just helped a documentary filmmaker, and I says, who did you see growing up? He goes, nobody. Now he had to see docs growing up. I said, do you know Herzog? He goes, no. Frederick Wiseman? No. He says, that's why your film is so good, because you didn't see it. But he didn't consciously go, I'm going to make a film. Like, how can you escape knowing documentary filmmaking in making your film? Because you've already seen you've seen a lot of films. I mean, I would love to talk the history of jazz docs with you, because I've studied that and shown it for 50 years. And then it's like, nope, you shouldn't talk to me. You should just have your own vision and do it. But in the long run, you might go, well, I can, touch up these little corners or whatever. Not that what I'm offering you is going to help, but I'm just saying I'd love to. A friend of mine's making a documentary on jazz, a huge LA jazz event, Duke Ellington's jazz concert he threw in LA. And he's been working on it for over a decade.
Wow.
And I'd love for you two to just sit down and talk, because it'd just be amazing, because you're, again, in that jazz community. It's like, it's not that huge of a community,
Right.
especially jazz film.
Yeah.
There really is a community of jazz film. I just found a guy who's got a great jazz documentary on YouTube, and he's going to be on my podcast. But anyways, I asked for 90 minutes. It's already 90 minutes.
Oh
So I
my
was wondering
God.
if we could plan a part 2, because there's so much I want to
Are
go
you
into.
serious? You want more time from me? No, just kidding.
No,
Well, this was enjoyable.
I'm
Can I just
very,
say? Can I just say one thing based on what you just last said?
yeah,
I'm very appreciative of because I wasn't aware of you and the jazz films that you've mentioned. Like I didn't know that you've studied and you're very that's something that you've been interested in. I haven't watched a lot of jazz films. I'm somebody who doesn't have a TV. I don't do streaming. It
yeah,
probably connects to what I said earlier. I'm very purposeful in terms of what I watch because I
yeah,
don't like to get distracted. I try
yeah.
to focus on something one at a time. So anyway, I'm very appreciative that somebody like yourself who's seeing so many jazz films per se as a doc form, that the way you would describe the preview and like you actually explained it perfectly because that was my intent. I wanted Bud's performance for it to speak for itself.
Yeah.
And it was the one, there's not many footage of him playing, but that was the one that I liked the most. And I wanted the speakers to come in and out and just kind of be in the background when Bud is actually performing. And what you told me, the feedback was great. Like you actually saw him looking up, you saw,
The Looking Up is amazing, and it's such a sweet song, and it's not like it's good footage.
Yeah, I just love that.
The sound is good, and there's a million things I wanted to ask you, like tech things. Is if you find a clip of Bud playing on YouTube, do you have to track it down and see who owns it to put it in your doc, or you can just put a lower third found on YouTube, and call it fair use? I mean,
Right.
it really boils down to lawyer budget in that regard of copyright. But that's why I wanted you to hook up with Mark Cantor, because he's sort of the godhead of all jazz docs now, because eventually if you're making a jazz doc, you're going to turn to Mark for some footage or something or whatever, and his expertise in whether it's Ken Burns or whatever. But the one jazz doc I would suggest you see in that regard is the Thelonious Monk one, where there's very little talking.
What's it called? Is it the Michael Blackwood one?
Yeah, it's Christian Blackwood.
The brothers. Yes. Yeah, I saw that one.
I mean, that's like,
I love that one.
Yeah. I don't want the middle of a Monk solo to be cut in with Clint Eastwood going, boy, Monk was really great.
I just saw.
Let the song play out, please. And nobody does that. I mean, have you gone to Reeling in the Years? You should ask them if they have any. They're a huge stockhouse for music. Those guys are amazing.
Yeah.
And they put a lot of their stuff in Watermarket now on YouTube. And we showed they made a Curtis Mayfield documentary way back years ago. Wow. And all they did, because they loved him so much, was edit 90 minutes of performance. It really wasn't any stupid. No talking heads. It's like, thank God.
Right.
But most people can't sit and watch 90 minutes, because now in the YouTube era, you watch it for 5 minutes. This is great. So we lost it. So then it's putting it into context, I mean, have you seen Fire Music, the avant-garde jazz doc?
No.
Anyways, I've been trying to see it. I mean, I think you can see it free on Canopy or whatever. Okay. But there's a million of them. I mean, there's lots of Thelonious Monk, and there's lots of Cecil Taylor docs, They're what you're doing has been done with other jazz artists in that vein, not just mainstream. There's lots of Louis Armstrong docs, and what else? But no, I really do want to do a part 2, because I want to go into the the making of documentary films. I mean, you spent 9 years making one, and now you're in, what year are you in the Bud film? How many years have you?
This is my third year.
Third year. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, it's not like you have a deadline. I have to have it out by next year. You can put that on you, but these things happen as they will. And no, I'm very serious, because there's a lot more questions that we didn't get into that I'd love to. And it can be 3, 4, 5 months down the line. It's
okay. Yeah. No, this is very enjoyable. It's actually, I've never talked about my mom or dad in that way. So this is kind of interesting to me as well.
Yeah. Because see, I think artists are more, the art of an interview is really, you're trying to sell a product. And that's why people in the professional world who are big, like if I go to Ken Burns, my friend, where I should tell you all about my friend who works with Ken Burns. And if I go to Ken Burns, he's got to do that as part of his job.
Right.
See, my approach is, no, I want it to be more about you. And then you can talk about your art, but it's more about, why did this person decide this calling in their life?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're a garbage collector or an art maker, it doesn't matter. Kind of, really, all I'm looking for is people who willing to talk for 90 minutes.
I mean, this was enjoyable because I also love interviewing. I've been interviewing quite a bit, not as much as you, but I've interviewed quite a bit. And so I'm learning from your questioning technique. And some of the questions were really good, I have to say.
Yeah. And I tell you that I think you came to me with your Broadway Treasures film. And
maybe.
You said, and I apologize, because it was right before COVID. And I said,
2019.
We'll have a screening at Beyond Baroque. And then it never happened.
Right.
And so I always appreciate people who reach out to me, because there's a lot going on there, and I can learn. And then learning of your success, making that film and the new film, I was like, Bud Powell, that was amazing. I says, like, dude, I got like 3 documentary projects I want to propose for you to take on.
Wow. Wow.
But it's like, no, I have my own vision, but
right.
I still, off camera, I can tell you, ideas, or email you some ideas. So,
okay.
Even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button,
yes.
I hope it never ends and we keep talking forever and ever. And I really look forward to part 2. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. This was enjoyable.
Yeah, super cool. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.